And so we are going to get started right on time. Welcome. We're glad you're here. My name's Nicole Miller. Most of you probably know me. I'm the Chief Academic Officer with Garrett County Public Schools. And we are glad you're here tonight. We have a lot of information to share. And then we also are going to have a listening session, which we'll talk about as well. Before we get started, I am going to read a statement specific to why you don't see Miss Baker here tonight, our superintendent. I regret to inform you that Superintendent Baker will not be able to attend tonight's community meeting due to an unexpected illness and an emergency surgery. We understand the importance of this meeting and the opportunity it provides for our community to express their concerns and provide feedback about the Northern Area Grade Band alignment and facility utilization. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause and want to assure you that we are committed to transparency and open communication with our community. The audio from this meeting is being recorded, and Superintendent Baker will be reviewing this meeting upon the receipt of the file. It will also be posted on our website for all public to be able to hear. Thank you for understanding, and we certainly wish Superintendent Baker a speedy recovery. At this time, just so you're aware, Ms. Baker is still under doctor's care and hopes to know tomorrow a little bit more about when she'll be able to return full-time. So that's where we are there. Before we get started, I do want to make a few other introductions. We have up front with us Ms. Schweitzer, she's the Director of Finance, and Mr. Weslowski, he is the Director of Maintenance and Transportation and something else, I think. I think I got your title a little bit, forgot some of it, but anyway, he's maintenance, transportation. And we also have a few of our elected board members here with us tonight. We have Mr. Josh Heimball, we have Mr. Rodney Glotfelty, and I also saw Mr. Van Sickle, so I'm sure he'll be swinging through as well. We do have some other staff in the back from central office as well. But that's mainly our team for tonight, and we have Dave Wolf up here in the front. He's our partner with Grimm and Parker. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the presentation. So the purpose of this meeting tonight is really to share additional information. You all are likely aware that we had our first community meeting in January. And at that meeting, there were a lot of questions and feedback provided, and we got several questions since then. And so we wanted to provide some additional information on our work and provide a status update on the Northern Area Grade Band and Facility Use Project. After we're complete with the presentation, we will have allotted time to receive feedback through public comment. I will clarify at this point, because I was asked in the back, what if you have a question? You can certainly ask your question during public comment, and we will take note of that question and work that into future presentations. That'll be our goal. Information is being presented based on what we know at this time. In order to create some of the models that you'll see tonight, there were a number of assumptions that had to be made. There were projections that had to occur in order for us to get there. And I think you will find, just as I found and others on the team found, that some of the information and models may seem drastic, and we certainly understand that. This is not projecting, it's not us projecting gloom and doom because we want this. We are facing some very serious challenges and some very challenging decisions that are going to have to be made for our county as we navigate current requirements. So the models you'll see tonight are just that. They're models of how we're projecting out the requirements that we're going to have to work through. So I just want to remind everybody why we're here talking about this. What brings us to this point? We have 4 factors that are converging. One is the blueprint for Maryland's future law. At this point, many of you probably have been following the information being shared about the blueprint. There are a lot of components to that law, and there are a lot of fiscal implications. And at this point, there's really no indication that it will be changing at this point. So that is a serious piece of information that we're having to navigate. We also have, of course, you've heard many times, the decline in enrollment. We have the revenue and the budget that is aligned to all of that. And then we have our state capital program. Our infrastructure in our county, the buildings that we have are aging and they're under capacity. And so that's another problem that we are dealing with. So at the end of the day, whatever solution that the county decides upon, ideally, we need to mitigate all of these at once so that we have a long-term sustainable plan for our county. Obviously, focusing on instructional programming and opportunities for students. Okay, so I did want to go through some of the historical work that has been done. We have received several questions about inquiries about other grade bands and what work has been done. A large chunk of work started in 2018 with the RISE strategic plan. And there's all of these blue documents, they're links to the documents for that work. So when we are complete tonight, this presentation along with the audio recording will be posted on our website. And so you'll be able to go right to this document and click on whatever links you want to click on. But it will take you to the reports from these studies. The first one was the RISE strategic plan. The second was the Strategic Facilities Committee. That one was facilitated, it was contracted out to a consultant by the name of Dr. Lever. That was in 2019, and you'll see there were several reports related to that. And then the 5-year strategic facilities plan in 2020. We've been studying our footprint, capital needs, and strategies for the last 5 years, and really before that, but I went back 5 years. This slide and the next slide includes the links to those pieces of work. This work included exploring redistricting a single high school, pre-K to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 12, pre-K to 8, 9 to 12, pre-K to 6, 7 to 12. There were a number of different grade bands that were explored in various studies. Some of the recommendations from these studies we have moved forward with and have been implementing. Others have not moved forward for a variety of reasons. This is This is a continuation of that list, some additional documents that have also informed our work. Of note is the first document on this list, a facilities feasibility study, December of 2021. That study was done with Dr. Lever as well, consultant, and that is the study that really led the district into a deeper analysis of a pre-K through 6, 7 through 12 grade band. It is important to note that over the course of time, this 5-year period of time, information has evolved, data has evolved, and requirements have changed and have been added in a lot of cases. So at this point, those pieces of information have also driven our county to look at a grade band of pre-K through 6, 7 through 12 in order to optimize instructional programs. So just a reminder to everyone here which options we're looking at tonight and providing an update on. So for all 3 of these options, Northern High School would become a 7 through 12, and we would reconfigure that space to include the 7th and 8th grade. Option A would be to maintain 4 elementary schools on the northern end, and then Northern High School 7 through 12. That does assume that we would vacate Northern Middle School. Option B is the same as option A, except for Grantsville and Route 40 would go together. And then option C is the most drastic of the options, and that's where Grantsville and Route 40 would be together, accident in Friendsville would be at Northern Elementary School, and then we'd have the 7 through 12 high school. And that certainly has several elementary schools vacated in that option. So with that, one of the things that was asked of us to provide was an analysis of the budget expenses, the operating budget, and a cost analysis between the options. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Schweitzer to share more on that information.
I'll just do it from here. Can you all hear me? Good evening. So, as requested, we're providing operating budget snapshot for the community tonight. And remember that the operating budget is the day-to-day expenses. That is not, they're not capital, they're not one-time in nature. They're all the things that occur on a daily basis. So, as we project out into future years, there are a lot of factors that can change the estimates. So what we really focused on here were the salaries and fixed charges, because Garrett County Public Schools is a people business. I come from the business world, and that's what I say. We're a people business. And I'm sure that Dr. Wildison would say that as well as our HR director. So 58.8% are salaries, and then that 21.8% are the fixed charges. The fixed charges are the other pieces of a staff member's compensation package. Their health care, their retirement, the FICA that you pay to the government, that all factors in to their total compensation package. We have a couple things that are happening here. Normally, staff salary and benefits are just negotiated every year. We do have inflation, and we have minimum wage requirements from time to time. But right now, the environment that we're working within, the blueprint has required all Maryland school systems to meet certain salary restrictions. So that's what we're facing right now. So to start with the blueprint requirements, we have 3 major compliance areas for teacher salaries. We have a $60,000 starting salary that must be in place by fiscal year 2027. We have a National Board Certification teacher stipend or add to base that is currently in place. It adds $10,000 above and beyond whatever rate or salary the teacher is already receiving. And then we must also negotiate and implement career ladders, and they must be in place by July 1st of 2024. Right now, we have a pretty steep climb on the $60,000 front. We're at $48,740 for a standard professional teacher. So that's a 23.1% increase that we are required to meet. The National Board Certification is really quite something when you start to think about it. We must add $10,000 on top of whatever the salary is. And then every 4 years, the teacher may renew his or her NBC and receive an additional amount of money. So in total, that could, if they renew 3 times, that could be $21,000 that are added on top of the $10,000 that they've already been receiving. On top of that, if Garrett County has a low performing school, then those National Board Certified teachers receive $7,000 above all the other pieces that we've already talked about. So that's a hefty price tag. It is a split, state and local, based upon wealth equalizing. Then the last one, the career ladder scale. salary scale, that is to move to a performance-based scale of earnings rather than a step-based or a years of service. And the increments for the different types of teachers are actually hard-coded in statute. Some are $5,000 between lanes, some are $10,000 between lanes, but those are the minimums. So when we did the analysis of what an average teacher is receiving in Garrett County for this current school year, it's $64,317. When we blend together all of these scenarios, absent of any negotiated agreement, but just living by the state mandated minimums, we're looking at fiscal year 2033 of a 60.9% increase in average teacher salaries in Garrett County. So we're looking at $103,467, and that's just the salary. So that was teachers. Now we're going to talk about our other staff, some of our support staff, some of our part-time hourly people, and minimum wage is a big deal, and especially in the state of Maryland. We have a new governor, Governor Moore, and one of the first things he did when he took office was introduce a piece of legislation called the Fair Wage Act of 2023. They had the hearing today. It did pass from the Senate to the House, and all indications are that it will likely pass. So what that means for Garrett County Public Schools is that on October 1st of 2023, minimum wage will increase to $15 per hour. We were on a pace to get to $15 per hour by January 1st of 2025. So that accelerates our pace for our support personnel. You can see up there that for every 25-cent increase per hour, it increases $76,000 to the operating budget. All things are connected. And so with this minimum wage increase, it also increases our transportation contracted service for our bus drivers, for our bus contractors. And so for every dollar that increases, it's about $60,000 for our transportation budget. So you can see that the minimum wage legislation will have an effect on Garrett County Public Schools. Okay, and so that was the salary piece. Now we're going over to the fixed charges piece. And inflation is the biggest factor for our health insurance benefit. It was 21.8% of our entire budget. And you can see up there that our total spend was $8.7 million. Now that includes our active employees as well as our retirees. So that was across all funds. That included our food service and anyone that is covered by a restricted source or a grant. CBIZ, which is our consultant, has benchmarked our inflation rate at 6%, and that's based upon other government education entities and what they're seeing in the industry. Historical trend data provides that our retiree increase is about 1% annually. So the amount that you see up there for the estimated average active is the board's share of healthcare. It's not the total, so it's not what employees are contributing. It is what the board is contributing on behalf of its employees. And the estimated average retiree is just that. So you can see that from 2023 to 2025, we are estimating a 10.1% increase. And then if you go all the way out to FY33, we're looking at a potential of 64% increase for healthcare. So the categories of fixed charges also include retirement and then our FICA, Social Security, and Medicare. And those are a factor, they're just a rate that's multiplied by salaries. So as these salaries are increasing, the dollars that must be contributed on behalf of our employees will also increase. The Maryland State Retirement, they publish their rate every year about this time for the following year. And while it's stayed fairly consistent, it has increased slightly over the last couple years. FICA and Medicare have not. But when we are looking at the rates or the estimate per teacher, because what we're trying to do is common size the teacher, in FY23 to FY33, we're looking at, again, a 61% increase in that part of the benefit. The way we did model this is assuming no increase in the rate. We really wanted to just see the factor based upon the salary increase. Okay, so here we have it all pulled together for you to show what an average compensation package for a teacher in Garrett County Public Schools is. So currently, it's $86,145. When we move out and have the blueprint implemented, in FY33, it could be 64%. It could be more. And it could be less, you know. These are estimates, but we feel that they're conservative estimates based upon the different lanes and the various legislative mandates. So another piece of the budget that we were asked to review for the community were utility costs. So we tried to provide a snapshot of what it could look like with do nothing and maintain all 6 schools, and then the options A, B, and C. One item to note that's really important to understand is that when we move to weighted student funding, which is happening in this budget that we're building right now, the per pupil expense becomes a really big deal, because the foundation is the piece of funding that is to cover utilities. So when we're spending as a school system $297.60 on average in the South, but $489.54 in the North, that means that our foundation dollars can buy more instructional pieces because the Northern dollars are buying more utility. So as that rate is that much higher, it continues to compress the ability to plow our money into instruction or student resources. Part of this this model that you all should note is that Northern High School, Northern Middle School, and Hickory are on a freestanding water treatment plant. And you'll see that there's, when we get to the Capitol, there are some items about that. That water treatment plant costs about $70,000 per year to operate. So that's a fixed cost. It, you know, doesn't matter how many students are in these 2 schools or attending Hickory, it runs every day. Also, Route 40 is on a well. We have 2 schools in our system that are on a well. And so as an operating cost, it's very cheap. But when something goes wrong with that well, which usually happens about, I don't know, for Route 40 happens about every 3 to 4 years, and it usually costs anywhere between $40,000 and $65,000 to fix. And so while that's not an operating cost here, it is an emergency capital requirement. So as we're diving into the utilities, it's just good to understand what makes up these schools. One item to note about this assumption is that we estimated a 1.5% increase in the rate to account for inflation. Okay, so now that was all the costs that we're gonna talk about. We're gonna move to our analysis of projected revenue. So one big change that is happening as we're building and developing the 2024 budget is the fact that Garrett County has moved from a maintenance of effort system to a local share system. Now I talked about this actually in our recording, because the March 14th board meeting, the weather was bad and the evening got late. And so you can see the slides and you can actually watch the presentation. But we did talk about the drawbacks of moving from maintenance of effort to local share. When this happens, the local share or the local funding must be used, every single dollar must be used to match or make whole all of these other program revenues. The program revenue per pupil amounts are hard-coded in law. And so the county's money or funding that they're giving to Garrett County Public Schools must be used for those specific programs, those specific allowable costs. They also must follow the student to the school. So one important thing that we're trying to change the mindset is that no longer can we discuss funding on an average per pupil. There is no average anymore. Every K through 12 student receives the foundation, which is the base, and then depending on the demographics of the student or the subgroups that he or she is a member of, then there are additional pieces of funding that follow that student for his or her care, education, achievement. And so our local funding is very restricted now. Whereas before, when we were on maintenance of effort, we had a lot more autonomy to spend the dollars where we wanted to and on what we wanted to. So here is a projection out to FY33 of what we believe our revenue could look like. So the orange line is county government and their increase. And we're expecting about a $10 million increase over 10 years. That's assuming that the relative wealth of Garrett County remains consistent. I'm not so sure that's going to happen. So the bluish purple line, the state of Maryland, that amount is increasing as well, but only at about 6.6 million. So overall, we will be receiving more funding. And you can see it's about a 30% increase. But remember, when you go back, the teacher salary goes up 64%. So our revenue is only going up 30%, but our teacher compensation packages are going up 64%. one item of note that was in the Baltimore Sun, I think sometime this week, was that Governor Moore's budget included $900 million for Blueprint funding. And it did. But that was for the solvency amount. That was to make sure that the state could afford Blueprint out to at least fiscal year 2028. So that $9 million is not going to be used for FY24, and none of that funding will actually matriculate down to the school systems. 900 million, sorry. Okay, so that was system-wide. Now we're going to look at the northern end. And the way that we looked at it was really big picture based upon all of the feeder schools, Northern Middle and Northern High, the demographics of all of the students, pre-K all the way up to 12th grade. And when we run those enrollment numbers through our model with weighted student funding, the amount of dollars that are going to be spent, or the maximum number of dollars that should be spent at Northern, is about 26.2% higher than what it is currently. Whereas the system as a whole is increasing 30%. The reason that the northern end is not increasing at the same rate as the southern end is because of the demographics of the student population. So their special education students have a higher amount of dollars that are following that student. Free and reduced meals students have another add to base that are following those students. Northern Area District has many schools that are mostly made up of students that are receiving the foundation or the base. So we've talked about this in several presentations about the fact that as a team, we've been analyzing our underweighted student funding, what it looks like for each school, what it looks like for the North, what it looks like for the South. We identified from the expenses in 2021 that all of the Northern area schools were over allocated by this weighted student funding measure. And our Southern schools were under allocated. We had one that was out of compliance. And so what that means is that a shifting of resources must occur. Now, in the current fiscal year that we're at, this current school year we're in, we have made some changes. We've made some changes at Northern Middle School that we're living with right now. We've made some changes at Friendsville and Accident. But going forward, we would likely have to make more changes, and likely at a steeper pace in order to get to a better range of compliance. So we took a deep dive into FY25. Now, all the other charts that I provided, we tried to show right now, 23 or 22, if it was an actual expense. We tried to provide 25, 30, and then 33. The reason we're talking here about 25 is because that's the year of the federal COVID relief funding cliff. It's also the year that many of our Blueprint implementation requirements have to be in effect, okay? As you go out to FY30 and FY33, you're going off of estimates, and the range of error could be higher. The reason we ended at 33 instead of going out further as it was requested was because legislation ends in FY33 as to the detailed amounts per pupil. So we wanted to just end it there. We have no way of even guessing what the inflationary index is going to be in FY33. So I did want to explain that. So anyway, what we're looking at in the northern end is a projected $17.5 million in FY25. One of my teammates has said over and over again, doing nothing isn't doing nothing. So something has to happen. Something has to change. And so right now, when we ran the current staffing, programming, and facility costs through our model, the northern end is $5.5 million over allocated. That's over the 100% that follows the student. So how do you save or reallocate $5.5 million? And what we've done is we have provided some options. Nothing has been approved. It's not a done deal. But we needed to provide the community what it may look like. So this is no change. That's not really an option on that big grid at the beginning, but this is like the do nothing option. And so this is assuming that we have all 6 of our schools and we continue to keep them open. We are looking at pretty significant cuts. We're assuming that we would be reallocating instructional staff. That's teachers, instructional assistants, teachers of all types to the south, because that's where the funding is really falling. We're looking at a 26% reduction in administration. The student support category are those nurses, counselors, social workers, school psychs. They would primarily become traveling. They would not be located at one school for a whole day. They would likely be traveling. And we would likely have other categories of staff members that would travel that have never traveled before. Possibly custodians. That was just one of the items that we modeled. Under this model, we would be looking quite possibly at by maybe not 25, but 26 or 27, that possibly Route 40 could have some combined classes. 4th and 5th grade might be a class. Friendsville may have that by 26, 27. And Accident would likely be a very singleton school by that point in time. So. Okay, so that was no change. Here's option A. Option A is we close this building that we're in right now. And we would be looking at still a pretty significant reallocation or cutting. They would just not be at the northern end of instructional staff, administration, all the categories. But what we can lay in to this model are some utility savings, some central support savings. By closing only one school, it's not a lot of central support savings. And then there is some school level non-salary savings. So that's what possibly an option A could look like. Option B is where Route 40 consolidates with Grantsville, but Northern Middle is still not operational. So in this model, we were able to not reallocate as much instructional staff, and we were able to achieve greater utility savings. greater amount of central support savings, and also the school level non-salary. So here is option C that we modeled, and this option offers the least disruption to the instructional staff. 20% is about 25 teachers across all 6 schools. We have the best utility savings here. And we also can capture the most central office support savings because of serving fewer schools. There's also some school level non-salary savings. So those were possibilities that we've modeled. Obviously, there are other things that a school system can do to save money, and here are some of them. We could eliminate our Hickory program. We could eliminate school-sponsored field trips, including the band and athletics. One option that could possibly come to fruition is that all CTE programs are somewhere else. They may be central, they may be, or they may be cut in some fashion. Some of our enrichment activities could be cut too. Robotics, the fine arts fair. And then one thing that I feel is really drastic, but we could do it, is to not offer transportation. Legally, we're required to offer transportation to special education students only. None of these are options that we are proposing. They are possibilities. And then, of course, there's school-sponsored athletics. And many of you know that I'm a sports mom, so, The thing that's really hard about this is that it is hard to come up with $5.5 million when you're just eroding the things that make Garrett County Public Schools what we are. So it was really hard to put these things on a slide.
All right. I said earlier, some of what you're going to see, it seems drastic, and it is, and it makes us feel probably the way you're feeling. I have a little one that's going to be coming through the northern end schools too. So we're faced with some really challenging decisions that we're going to have to navigate. And again, I just want to reiterate, none of those decisions have been made. These are models, they're projections, looking at what we're having to navigate with the framework that we've been given. And these are also models. They're simply models. No decision's been made. So what you see here on the screen now is just taking a look at elementary only, northern end, a class size analysis model based on what you just heard with all the revenue and the reallocation and all of that, of how this could potentially look. Instructionally, this makes my stomach feel not good because we would not want this. We as instructional leaders would not want this. We know that you as parents don't want this. Now, granted, this is just one way of putting these numbers on a chart. There are other configurations that we could consider, but we had to get something on a chart, right? So that we could see what does this kind of look like. So you see each school, this is option A or keeping everything the same because we're only looking at elementary schools, so it's the 4 elementary schools. You can see all 4 elementary schools with projected enrollment. Again, notice we're looking at FY25 here. So the model is based on FY25. It's a high-level analysis that is based on projected enrollment and is only one way to organize staff to show how far projected revenue can go. And it seems drastic. You can see dramatic increases to class size in certain areas. You can see the variances existing between schools, 15 to 26 in a class. And you can see the way we've modeled it here, Accident has some extremely high class sizes. But, you could also adjust that, put an extra teacher between K1 and 2, and have a combined 3rd and 4th grade class at Friendsville with 35 students in it. That makes me sick to my stomach too. So we have to figure out a way to get some economies of scale to preserve instructional programming, or we take that slide that had all of the programs that make Garrett County what Garrett County is and start looking at that. These are, again, not what we're necessarily recommending, but these are the types of conversations that the elected board and staff are going to have as we work through this. This is a similar type model, but it's for option B. You'll see Grantsville and Route 40 are combined here. And when you do the math, you can see the smoothing of class sizes for that school. It ranges from about 19 to 23 per class, which is a very reasonable elementary school class size. And it smooths it so that you don't have the 27s and then the 15s. But this particular slide doesn't, the Accident and Friendsville are looking the same. And again, that's just one way. We could do what I said on the last slide with, some singletons and years out, having some combined classes the way Swan Meadow is right now, but the number of kids in those classes would be significantly higher, which is problematic. And then this is just an example of what option C could look like. This is Grantsville Route 40 remains the same. Northern Elementary would have Friendsville and Route 40, or Friendsville and Accident enrollment combined. You can see it does smooth some of the class sizes. There's less variance, but kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd is still higher than we would like. So that's something that we would have to take a look at. In the perfect world, we'd want to mitigate, even in this model, some of the K1-2 there. So we would have to look at that. There is no minimum for class size. It's a question that's been asked, just as there's no cap. There are certain programs that must have a very low student to teacher ratio based on the needs of the students. If you think about our alternative learning outcomes programs with students that have significant disabilities, there are reasons why some of our class sizes have to be very low teacher-student ratio. Of course, in a general ed setting, when you get too small, it can impact the groupings. The amount of diverse groupings that you can do, conversation, discussion, can impact the instructional program, but there is no minimum. We don't want class sizes over 30 just as much as you don't want class sizes over 30. That's not something that we want to see happen in our county. Some of the options that we're considering lend itself more to having lower ratios, some not as much, but those are some of the difficult conversations and decisions that eventually are going to have to come to fruition. So again, no decisions have been made. These are just their models, taking a look at how we can smooth some of this impact that we're going to feel when it comes to funding for the northern end, and still preserve our instructional programs and hopefully be able to through the blueprint, expand some instructional programs using unconventional ways, but it's going to be a challenging situation. Okay, so far today, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Schweitzer, we've talked about the operational side of the house, the operational budget. That's one of the pots that fall into the whole total funding of the school system. We're going to shift now to one of the other pots that goes into that funnel. And it also links back to that first, I think it was the second slide that had the 4 things converging, the 4 problems that we're having to navigate. This is one of those problems that we're having to navigate, the capital side of the house. This is the facilities, okay? So we did an analysis of all the northern facilities, and basically what we did here is we looked at each individual school, and then we looked at Northern Middle and the current footprint, Northern Elementary, Northern High. All of the numbers on this screen are projections, and they're estimates that will need to be adjusted based on inflationary rates in the future. We know the construction world is inflating just like every other thing within our economy right now. So they're probably as low as they're ever going to be, is probably the best way to put that. The sources to be able to get these numbers, if you want to learn more about our capital needs, the Comprehensive Maintenance Plan for Educational Facilities and the CIP, the Proposed Capital Improvement Plan. That's where we pulled this information. And if you click on that link, are you able to do that? Okay. Well, if you click on that link, it's going to take you to a spreadsheet, and it will show all of the deferred maintenance, and it will show how those numbers were derived, so that you can see what actually needs to happen at each of the schools to make up those numbers. The 10 to 15,000 for Grantsville depend. The reason it's a range is because it depends on what model, what option under this model we would go with. So for option A, I believe it's 10,000. I can't tell based on, I'd have to click on my little link, but I think it was option A was 10,000, and the other options go up to 15,000 because we have to do some minor renovations as we go through the options. But if you're interested in learning about that, I don't have it memorized, I apologize. Just click on the capital cost analysis and you'll be able to see where it changes. The same thing's true for Northern High School. The difference is the do nothing is in keeping it 9 through 12 is the 3 million number, and the 5 million number is going 7 through 12. So it has the estimate of the renovations that would need to be included at Northern High School to make the 7 through 12 a viable option. So this is just another way of looking at combining the different options and what the capital costs would be based on the deferred maintenance, the things that we know are going to happen to ensure that these buildings are educationally sustainable. You can see the keep current northern area footprint, and the current grade band is almost 23 million over the course of the next several years, 5 to 10. Option A is not really, it's not better, right? It's more. So option A goes up to 25. Option B does bring it down to 20. And then you can see option C, how significantly less capital investment would be required. And that's obviously the option that keeps this building. One of the reasons is because this building, the middle school, is a very well maintained and recently renovated facility. Okay, so we've had a lot of questions about Friendsville, so Mr. Weslowski is going to take over and talk about that.
Good evening. we were asked to look at a comparison of Friendsville Elementary School to do a limited renovation versus building a new school. So we give our best shot at that. With regard to a limited renovation, which is a lot like we just did at Grantsville, we have a state rated capacity there of 294 students at that building. We know the square footage is 31,388 feet. So currently that's about 107 square foot per student. The current IAC rate for limited renovation in terms of their funding is about $385 a square foot. So we're coming up with the cost of that 12 million and change number that you see there. We're showing that the local cost share right now, we're at 90-10. So locally it's about $1 million, which is about 10%. But again, that could change through legislation. Right now we're taking full advantage of our 90-10. There's always design costs, which we account for. There's some site work, and then we have some furniture needs. So at the bottom line, as a projection right now, we're looking at about 13 million as a total between design and adding furniture to do that. Now, we control the scope, we control the ed spec. So that number could come down based on when we sit down and figure out what spaces we want to do, what we don't want to do, like we did at Grantsville. This is kind of a totality of doing all the square footage, but we can control that to bring that down as we go through that. The difficult task was to say, okay, what if we wanted to build a new Friendsville? We know based on the current population there in the sixth grade. So I kind of landed on a number of building a school for about 200 students. 200 students would give us the pre-K to sixth thing, and then we'd probably be about 75%, so it gives about 25% for some growth to happen within that area. Currently, by the IAC standard, we are at you have to do 141 square foot per student. So they have a calculation, as soon as you put that in there, that's what you get is 141. That's where they are now. Okay, so right now, based on our colleagues and feedback we're getting, we're about $500 a square foot in terms of new school construction. Okay, that's kind of where the state is at this point. So that brings our total just for the construction at the $14 million. Okay, just for the square footage to build that. However, we have design in there also to design that. Then where it gets difficult is that we have to talk about a site. We have to talk about purchasing land. Right now, Friendsville sits on 7 acres. Okay, so do we need 7 acres? Do we need 7 to 10 acres? Do we need up to 12 acres? That has to be determined. We're going to build a long building, or we're going to build a 2-story building. So all these things, when you start getting into sites, you're talking about purchasing the land, then all the infrastructure. You know, do you have sewer? Do you have water? So all those kind of things. So that's really hard to put a number on until you really, really start that process. Okay. So right now I just, for the site work, again, parking lots, all new playgrounds, ball fields. So you're building all those things. So you can really see the difference between just renovating where you keep a lot of what you have and then totally, rebuilding new. Okay. So that was our best shot. So we're at about 18.9, total cost to do that. But remember that in terms of the local burden, locally, all that site work that I talked about and purchasing the land, that is all has to be paid for locally. The only thing the state will participate is the construction and design of the building at that 90-10 split. There's a bigger burden locally of about $6 million versus the $2 million, $2.5 million in terms of picking a renovation over building a new building. Okay. All right, okay, so at the last meeting, Grimmon Parker was here and kind of presented some conceptual schematic. We have representative here in the front, David Wolf's here. So this is kind of what we landed on last time. It was kind of presented in terms of what renovations needed to be done at Northern High to handle the 7 through 12. David, working for this firm, gave us a cost estimate of $2,044,268 based on these areas of building that need to do that. Okay. Some highlights to that. We talked about in this area of the building, really making that the 7th and 8th grade learning area. So there's some work that needs to be done in there with wall demolition and some different things to open those up. With regard to the band and music, we think that we need to kind of gut that whole area and kind of reconfigure it to really be allowed a space to accommodate 7th and 8th music, and then also the upper grade music. That's kind of important to the project. In the back here, we think we need to take some of the 3 rooms and make some math areas to kind of make an upper level math area, and then do some things. We have a little bit of extra space, we think, in ag right now to kind of create some things there. In the middle of the building here, the current health suite in Northern High is not large enough in terms of if we had the 7th and 8th grades. So we need to do something here to enlarge the health suite, kind of a teacher planning area, and we want to move the SRO right here to the front entrance with a window. So the SRO is sitting directly at the front entrance, being able to see that for the security purposes. We have some in the AOL special ed area to do that. Upstairs on the 2nd floor, right now, our STARS program is kind of our regionalized behavior intervention program. So we need to do some things in those spaces. And then we also have, right now in the upstairs in the end of the hall, we have an old home ec lab that we know we can capture for I think it's a biology space. And the other space is now kind of a larger teacher's lounge. I think we can capture that and make that and also an instructional space. So that's kind of what we think right now. I think we need to do a little bit in the locker rooms to kind of spruce them up a little bit. That's not shown on here. But right now, that's the estimate where we're at. Now, we have some ability, like I said, with Friendsville to kind of control this. Do we necessarily have to do all this? So we still have some decisions to go when we look at programs, we look at staffing. You know, do we have to do the complete package? Maybe. And maybe there is a way to save some things, some savings within that number. Okay, so that's Northern High School based on the work that Grimm and Parker did. Now we're going to go to where we are right now. Will be Northern Elementary School. That's our cost estimate to do what we need to do in this building, which is, for the biggest part, is to turn these 7 rooms to accommodate pre-K and K. And the biggest thing you'll see there is a little tea room. We're required to have toilet rooms for those grades. So that is a big part of the project, is to get that. Obviously, our play area in the back. We have to build our playgrounds. And then to accommodate our 6th grade, we have to do some things here with science for 6th grade. And then this kind of whole suite needs to be reconfigured to get the science in their STEM. But again, our AOL, which is special ed, and then those regional special ed behavior programs for STARS. So this is kind of where we are with this number to get this building to accommodate the pre-K to 6 students. We were asked about some different things with actually the site. I don't know if this is the best picture, but you can see that. You know, Accident is in the process of, they've got a barn they're trying to work into their program. So we kind of looked at maybe this area over here on the other side of the tennis courts. Again, these are just all concepts, and just kind of walking the site doesn't necessarily mean it has to go there. We're just kind of determining if we had enough room. There's also a high tunnel spot we think we can go here. We have our play area in the back. But as you can see, this campus has, you know, the whole Hickory. So we have some flexibility with some spaces here. But this is just a concept of where we think we could add those things to support the programs here that are currently at Friendsville and Accident. All right, now there was a lot of questions. I think it's better. Next slide. We talked about traffic. When Grantsville came here as part of the renovation, we saw the need to do something with the entranceway. If you were here in the morning, especially when buses and cars and that, the exit was more of the problem when everybody was trying to leave at one time. In the morning, everybody comes in at different times. It's not as bad. So at the minimum, what we're looking at right now is we know that we need to add a dedicated lane to get the traffic that needs to go south on 219. Because the accident zone is that way, and a lot of people will come from Friendsville from Bear Creek. So we're thinking, is that right? So we're thinking at a minimum that we need to make a dedicated lane, so when you get in that lane, you can just drop right onto 219, merge in, and keep going. There's also talk, and we can look at, you know, can we add a second entrance where we can extend this road potentially, you know, and then have an in and out? I think that's something we can evaluate whenever we get into that thing. But I think at the very minimum, we have to make sure that we increase the size of that, add that lane to really help out the traffic at that point. And again, that's working with county roads, state highway, and all those individuals to kind of make that happen. Okay. This next section is some frequently asked questions. A lot of this came off of some of that. You're taking. Oh my God, no. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It is frequently asked question time, although we have asked questions. You're going to come back in a minute. Don't worry. So it is frequently asked question time, although we have answered several questions throughout the presentation that have been asked of us. So Title I status has come up. You know, we do have a few schools on the northern end that currently receive Title I funding. That is funding associated with socioeconomic status. So a high free and reduced meals population can sometimes qualify for Title I. Right now on the northern end, Grantsville qualifies for Title I and Friendsville qualifies for Title I. It does allow for additional resources for those schools. So the question was, what happens to the Title I status if we have schools come together? So for Grantsville and Route 40, if Route 40 would close, Grantsville's Title I status would continue for the fiscal 24 school year. So that's next school year. For Northern Elementary, it's a little more complicated. And this is, all this information is based on current guidance from the Maryland State Department of Education and current free and reduced meals numbers. So Northern Elementary, we have to project out to FY25 based on the timeline, which is a little bit harder. It puts us 1 year out further on data. But based on what the state said, if Accident and Friendsville would move to Northern Elementary in FY25, and really any time they would move, the Title I status for Friendsville would be lost for 1 year because the two schools are moving into a new school. So even though that population of Friendsville is still the same population of Friendsville, they're moving into a new school. There's a new number associated with it. So the state collects that data differently. So it would be, they would lose it for the 1 year. It would be our goal to provide a stopgap to continue those services for that year until we were able to get new free and reduced meals numbers obtained for the state. That could potentially be done through our Blueprint transition funding. That it does go down every year, but we would still have some funding in that program that we could potentially do a stopgap there. So that would be our goal. And then what we would do is a waiver would be submitted to MSDE after that year passes. So the second year that Northern Elementary is in existence, a waiver would then be submitted to MSDE to request a school-wide Title I designation for the fiscal 26 school year based on the school's farms percentage. So the number of Title I teachers is evaluated every year across the entire system and is based on rank order and the total amount of Title I funding. So that would be much, I don't think we would be able to give an accurate projection on that. So that's where we're at. It has to be evaluated yearly. Community schools was also a question. You know, how would that work? We do not have at this time as much information on that. These are the Blueprint community schools that are designated in the Blueprint law based on the concentration of poverty. Right now, Garrett County Public Schools has one Blueprint community school for the next school year, fiscal 24, and that is Yoklades Elementary School. Right now, we're still awaiting guidance from MSDE as to how eligibility for this particular funding source would be handled if we change our footprint. So that's where we're at there. Some instructional program questions. There's a question about special programs and staffing at Northern Elementary. Should that be the direction the system goes? We would have our STARS program there, our Special Education Center, pre-K. Obviously, those student groups require additional supports. So all of these programs certainly right now have positions associated with them as well as student service supports. The number and type of positions is based on the specific student needs that are in those programs. So, and they are currently evaluated frequently, and that will continue. All the positions and supports associated with these programs would follow the students to Northern Elementary. Academic achievement levels for 6th grade. The option C does provide for 2 classes per grade, which does allow for flexibility to group students for, based on instructional needs and ensure that students are both challenged and supported as well. And then there were some questions about career and technical education. By adjusting the grade band, we will be able to provide increased opportunity for students to engage in CTE education. And right now, these are the 2 programs that we're exploring and looking at implementing in the near future. The Maryland Fire and Rescue Institute is the first, and registered apprenticeship is the second. Registered apprenticeship is part of the blueprint, and it likely would start small at the very beginning, but then could grow to a significant program over time. And it spans all different kinds of CTE type programs. It's a partnership with businesses, and so it can be very diverse in nature. Just some other information to be aware of. And then I'm just going to backtrack for a minute. You saw those maps that had the cost estimate of renovation. That cost estimate was included in that capital analysis that we did. So the renovation cost, that 1.4 million and the 4 million, those numbers were included in that slide that had the box A, B, C, and D. Okay, so that's one thing to be aware of. The cost of the playground for Northern Elementary was also included in the renovation estimate. So, I mean, we all know that the playground is expensive, so we want to make sure that you're aware of that. GCPS will utilize maintenance and custodial staff to relocate the majority of all usable physical supplies. So there was a question about how, accident has usable supplies, materials, textbooks, etc. So does Friendsville. How do we get them into a central location? Our maintenance staff and custodial staff will do that, just like they did Grantsville when they brought them to Northern Middle School and then back to Grantsville. It is possible that we may have to solicit a few outside vendors, possibly if it's needed to move the bigger items such as the barn, the high tunnel, those types of things. Anything that is deemed to be unusable and not brought to the central location would be put up for auction. There is adequate space in this facility that we're in to efficiently house all reusable indoor-outdoor equipment from both schools. New classroom equipment will be prioritized and provided for Northern Elementary if funding is available. That's our hope, similar to the Grantsville project. That estimated cost is $300,000. That is not in any of the earlier slide cost estimates, just so everybody's aware. The Accident Elementary barn, high tunnel you saw earlier, will be located. They would be relocated to Northern Elementary. And we would be responsible for that relocation. Okay.
Some other questions that we received in terms of the estimated renovation timeline for the proposed Northern Elementary. We would start potentially in the spring and definitely through the summer of 2024 to have it complete when the students arrived here on our post-Labor Day start. Will renovations be completed for the grade band alignment occur at the start? Yes, that should occur, that we should be ready for that. Northern Middle School students be displaced prior to the project? No. I think we can do most of it, as I said, later in spring and definitely over the summer. We won't need any trailer or rental spaces for any of these renovations. Yes, Grantsville renovation exceeded the budget. Yes, like I said, this is very hard to predict in this environment, but we're optimistic that the budgets that we think we have and the timelines, we should be able to meet the scope and get the work done at this point. And also, is there adequate available space at the proposal Northern Elementary facility to offer students a quality playground, high tunnel? I think we answered that. We showed that. Yes, I think we can do that. Some other questions. Is the repair renovation timeline to maintain accident in Friendsville School shorter than the proposed Northern Elementary time. Yeah, the roof and parking lot replacements at Accident, that would kind of be the same kind of concept, spring, summer, about the same time. However, when you get to Friendsville, it's about a 12 to 18 month project, as Grantsville was, to do that. And those students would definitely have to be displaced like we did Grantsville if we move forward with anything at Friendsville. What type of outdoor renovation would need to require at the proposed Northern Elementary, the playground, and we talked about that so much with the playground in the back. We have a basketball court, so we think we're going to have adequate outdoor facilities here at this facility. There's a question about parking. There's 92 spaces out front. I think currently, I got from HR is about 57 to 60 between the two schools. So I think there's plenty of spaces out front to accommodate the staff here. And there was a question about, can we designate some of those spaces for parents to pull in? And I think with the 92 minus the staff, I think we can do that relatively easily. So we do that at some of the other schools. Now, transportation, with Accident, it's 5 minutes down the road. So you can think if you're on a bus, it's 5 minutes further to come up here, just like you do in your car. Okay, so that's kind of the way you do that. So each student, depending on where they board, is probably looking at the 5 additional minutes. We're going to, for the Accident routes, I see just keeping a lot of the routes exactly the same, and then just bringing the bus here and bypassing Accident. Friendsville's a different story. Friendsville, we have some longer routes. So Friendsville, I'm going to have to do a deep dive to really dissect those routes and change those routes. Try to get it under the hour. We try to stay under an hour where we can in most parts of the county. So with Friendsville, we'd have to adjust some routes, and if needed, probably have to shift the bus, not necessarily buy a new bus, maybe shift a route from somewhere to add another bus to that area to keep those ride times down. You're probably 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 minutes, depending on which way you come here. So again, if any student in that area is going to ride the bus that much longer, that's what it takes to get here. Okay? I mean, that's reality. But going back to Accident in Friendsville, especially in the afternoon, we'll leave here at 3:15. So for the Accident in Friendsville, currently, they don't even board the buses at their schools. The Accident's probably 3:30, 3:35. Friendsville's closer to 3:40. So by the time they leave, they're not even departing down their schools till 3:45, 3:50, maybe even 3:55 at Friendsville. So all that time will be recaptured, because when the bus leaves here, it goes directly to the route and doesn't have to do that 20 minutes of stop time. So the students will get home earlier because they don't have to make those stops. Okay? All right. And then in the morning, the high school and middle school students will capture that time, because they have to stop now at Accident, wait for the unload, and they just sit on the bus. And the same thing at Friendsville. So those students will have a little shorter time because they won't have to stop in and wait for those schools. Okay, but again, we're always committed to mitigating significant increases in ride time where it's possible. Okay. Other questions we had, there's a question about lockers. There's 647 projected. There's 600 lockers. I think from talking to the administration, I think a lot of students don't use lockers for whatever reason now, and so I think they don't feel that would be an issue. Redistricting. We explored redistricting, and I can just kind of tell you when. I think it was Dr. Lever's time with Dr. Miller referenced. We looked at north to south. So when I did redistricting plan, we looked at how to go as far as Mayhew Inn Road, if you know where that is, JG's, go out that way, come up Sang Run, and take that portion. Went as far as Sand Flat Road in the south, across to Paradise Point, made our way out Glendale, North Glade. I think we went far as Sky Valley. I don't know if we made quite as far. And there's just not a lot of students in that area to make any significant difference in trying to really balance the north and south enrollment. There's just not a lot of students in there. So the biggest thing when you do that, the ultimate thing is, you start getting to some really long ride times for kids. You might getting on a bus over by Kurt's Corner to come here. I mean, there's just so really we did look at a redistricting plan to try to do that, and that just seemed that this wasn't reasonable for those ride times. Does academic performance play a role in meeting utilization rates? The answer to that is no. Academic performance does not play a role in implementing instructional strategies. Is it possible to wait to see the change in the South if this is effective? And I'm reading this because I didn't do this one, but it says, due to blueprint requirements, If the decision is to wait, the northern area schools will not look the same as they do now. It'll be difficult, in some cases impossible, to provide equal programming. Okay? And then what would happen to Accident and Friendsville if they close? Those are turned back over to county government. There was a question about gym space, and that really would, the county government would have to make a decision on, is that going to become a community center, close, all those things. So that decision would really rely with the county government if we turn the facility over. However, we'd be committed to maximizing the space that we have for gyms to support, any of those youth programs. We'd be committed to doing that. And that's it. One more. Can open space at Northern High School be utilized for Garrett County Public School staff offices? Absolutely, it could. This could be considered, but renovations would be needed. Is it possible to mothball areas of Northern High School or other schools to increase utilization numbers? The answer to that is no. The state does not allow you to just mothball areas and then take it off your state rated. To them, a classroom is a classroom, and it's available to you. So I kind of understand where they're coming from there. Is there potential for a different grade band structure? And I think this was answered previously, but everything's kind of been considered in previous presentations, but the solution has to align the root problems and current information. What happens, this is a good question. What happens if we're unable to meet the 60% utilization rates after consolidation in future years? So now we're talking about option C. So if we adopt option C, remember, I think we talked in the last one about this, the state is really hard looking at your adjacent schools. So if you have seats in other schools, they're going to want you to fill those, that they're going to take it off your funding. So in this scenario, it's very unlikely that if this school got to 60%, we couldn't pick 60% of the kids up and go to another school. It's highly unlikely. Again, if we adopt C, we wouldn't have space in any adjacent schools to do that. Now, if that did arise and we refuse to do that and say, no, we're going to keep them, then obviously our funding could be jeopardized if we're not willing to move our kids to adjacent schools. Again, I think that's a very highly unlikely scenario under option C, okay? And then as student enrollment continues to drop, what has changed needed to further consolidation years to come? And again, this depends on the solution that's chosen at this time, and then how we would move forward, again, if we continue to lose enrollment. That's it? All right, that's it.
No, it's a duplicate. Okay. Thank you for letting us get through all of that. That was a lot of information. We recognize that. We are going to go ahead and shift to the public comment portion. And Dave. I would have had to scratch the floor, and I didn't want to do that. All right. So we are going to follow the same expectations that we do for our regular scheduled board meetings. Public comment is expected to follow the same protocol. Topics excluded from public comment include individual personnel issues, comments identifying individual students or staff members, matters that are on appeal or may be appealed, topics for which the board schedules formal public hearings, and advertising or solicitation for products and or services. We are going to ask that you keep your comments to the 3 minutes that we do for our regularly scheduled meetings. And we have, it looks like about 11 signed up to speak. If you've changed your mind, that's fine. Just let me know it when I call your name. And if you have a question, please feel free to ask it during your public comment. We are not going to respond to it tonight, but we are going to take it down, and we will integrate it into future presentations will be our goal. So we're going to go ahead and start with Christy and Lowe.
Hello, my name is Christy Enlow, and I'm currently serving as the 2022-2023 North Garrett FFA Chapter President, and I am representing the Garrett County Farm Bureau. Today I'm going to be reading a letter from the Garrett County Farm Bureau concerning, what their concerns are. To whom it may concern. The purpose of this letter is to express the Garrett County Farm Bureau's concerns in reference to the proposed changes to the ag programs at both Northern and Southern Garrett High Schools, as the blueprint and grade band alignment plans are being implemented. Proposed changes at Southern include taking 2 of 4 classroom spaces of all which are used for either ag education or the FFA program. This will cause limited space for CTE, career and technology education supplies, as well as study and practice materials for multiple competitions and events that the FFA members compete in year-round. The FFA at Southern High School is the largest club and in the school with 38 members currently. With the loss of these rooms, there won't be enough space for all the students to have a seat for the meetings. With 7th and 8th grades being added to the mix, this may add to the membership and create more overcrowding. Proposed changes at Northern are far more significant. The current proposal calls for taking away the current ag classroom and building a new classroom by taking part of the already small shop. These changes and limiting the space raises major safety concerns for these students. The equipment necessary to teach the ag curriculum classes is substantial in both size and quantity. The limited space being proposed is going to cause a reduction of equipment, which will increase wait times and decrease the hands-on time for students. These will also be a reduced amount of space for materials for projects. For example, they are currently building a hay wagon in their shop. If their shop size is reduced as planned, it will greatly limit any large-scale learning projects like this. The FFA at Northern is also the largest club in the school with 48 members. Just as at Southern, when 7th and 8th grade are thrown into the mix, the enrollment and members in this program are sure to also increase, but space and resources are planned to be reduced. The Farm Bureau Board of Directors have contacted Mike DiGiacomo and with the Governor's Workforce Development Board. He is the one charged with implementing the blueprint into the CTE programs at the state level. He has told us that no school system should be removing agriculture education resources for the blueprint. Instead, he said they should be looking at ways to expand the current program. And now I'm going to turn it over to Anthony Gottfeldy to read the rest.
I get 3 minutes too, right? Cool. Well, I'm Anthony Gottfeldy. I'm here on behalf of the Garrett County Farm Bureau as their 2022-2023 Ag Ambassador. Our students need these areas to obtain crucial hands-on learning experiences that can strengthen their education and provide real-world life skills. We urge you to reconsider the changes being made to these program spaces, as appropriate facilities are vital to these programs which have been successful for generations. Looking at the proposed high school grade band changes, there are other available spaces that could be utilized instead of taking them from agriculture programs. It has become evident that growing and strengthening local food sources is vital to our food supply chain. While some farmland in Maryland is being lost to urban sprawl, Western Maryland is still blessed with agricultural acreage. The bright young minds that are needed to cultivate and grow the next generation of agricultural ideas that will feed the local and regional population are represented in the FFA and agricultural programs. The foundational knowledge and experience being offered in these classes serves not only the students, but the broader population as well. These programs should be expanding and not diminishing. The implications of cutting these resources should be weighted carefully, not only against the vocational education for our students, but especially against the context of food production and distribution in the coming years and generations. As the blueprint and grade band alignment plans are implemented, keep in mind that each of these schools have unique agricultural-related projects such as growing produce in high tunnels, raising bees, and maintaining wildflower gardens to help pollinators that support our crops. Please do not take these agricultural experiences away from our youngest learners. We will continue to help support these elementary initiatives to speak the passion for agriculture in our youth. The Garrett County Farm Bureau is interested in working with the Garrett County Public School System to help expand the county's agricultural education opportunities and FFA programs. We do not want to see the educational opportunities be limited for our students by reducing classrooms and resources, creating safety issues by cutting the shop size, or closing community schools, because each of these would greatly impact agriculture hands-on learning opportunities in this county. We urge you to pause these decisions to give time for other possible solutions to be explored, to do what is best for our students and our communities. Thank you for your time invested into our students, which are our future of Garrett County. Please let us know how we can work with you to support agriculture experiences. From the Garrett County Farm Bureau Board of Directors and Paul Custer, the President.
Thank you. Linda Bradley.
Good evening. While this meeting is primarily about the northern end of the county, some of what I have said at prior meetings bears repeating, because the county as a whole will be affected by what happens at Swan Meadow, including the schools in the northern end. And the hard decisions that the board needs to make are based on facts that also apply to Swan Meadow. Some of you have never heard, some of the people in the audience have never heard some of these facts, so I'm glad that there are some different people here to hear these things. Research done by many organizations across the United States show that students do better in small community schools than in large consolidated schools. Smaller schools are more excellent in test scores, lower numbers of bullying incidences, lower dropout rates, etc. And in some states, consolidated schools are being closed, and jurisdictions are reverting back to their smaller, more successful community schools. In last summer's Glade Star, the Historical Society publication, several mayors of our small towns were interviewed, and they said that when their small local schools closed, their communities were affected very detrimentally, and that includes Kitzmiller, et cetera. According to the Advisory Committee for Swan Meadow, it will be more expensive to close Swan Meadow than to keep it open. And that is because there are 35 students at Swan Meadow right now that will leave the system completely instead of transferring to another school. So the school board will be losing at least $8,300 per 35 for each of those 35 students if they leave the county altogether, the county schools. And if Route 40 school closes, there are more students that will be very likely to be homeschooled. Okay, and don't you think it makes sense to wait until a new superintendent is hired instead of making these decisions right now? Our county now has a DEI committee set up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important in the world today, and our Swan Meadow School is the most diverse school in the county. If Swan Meadow closes and those schools leave, our county will have pretty much zero diversity, and cultural diversity is just as important as racial diversity. Swan Meadow specifically contributes to much of our county. The students are involved with service projects, the harvest sale, blah, blah, blah. Everything that goes on in the southern end of the county pretty much revolves around Swan Meadow. And if schools continue to close, it's going to be harder for the county to get new businesses to come in here, new families to come in here, and the county will continue to decline in population. And who knows what will happen in the next few decades. Swan Meadow schools are extremely high compared to test scores. Their test scores are extremely high compared to the rest of the state. It's only one of 3 5-star schools in the county. It's very worth preserving for its history, its diversity, its uniqueness. So if there's any way you can preserve Swan Meadow, please, please, please try to do that. Thank you for letting me go over time. Bye.
Okay. Stephanie Boyd.
Thank you for. I just want to say thank you for answering a lot of the questions that we have submitted via email. Couple further questions that I have based after today's presentation. Specifically, I know Rich mentioned about having to do a deeper dive into the Friendsville buses. Currently, we have some Friendsville kiddos that get on the bus at 6:50 a.m. and get off the bus at 4:30 p.m. Those elementary kids are gone from their home for 9 hours and 40 minutes, which is a very long day, even for adults. So I would just ask for a deeper dive into that to be shared publicly, and potentially how that could be redone. Other thing he shared was that redistricting has been evaluated. That's not very publicly shown anywhere. If that's available information, it would be wonderful to see how those were actually measured and how many students do live in those potential redistricting areas. One question that I have is about what research studies or evidence-based practice are we basing our decisions to change to this grade band? I know that there were some site visits that have been conducted in West Virginia schools, but have we visited any Maryland schools? Because I know West Virginia and Maryland do have different standards. And then this last one's just a little bit sensitive based off of the events that happened this week, but is it safe for all of our students to be on one campus? I'm just asking that because I know at Accident, our reunification site, I believe, is the church down the street. But if we're all here, how do our kiddos get out? Do they run down to Cove Run and go up to the Cove and we'll pick them up there? Like, what's the plan? So I just would like to hear a little bit of information about the safety and security.
Jessica Brown.
So I want to reiterate, thank you so much for all the questions that were answered, because if you guys didn't know, we did send them 4 pages, single-spaced questions. So I really appreciate that. And you did hit most of those. So I will be typing up all those answers and sharing with the community in another format. A couple things I want to touch on, and this is definitely not a very well-prepared public comment, so I apologize if I squirrel. So one thing looking at that really bothered me, of course, in today's presentation was classroom sizes. And even with going, what I'm concerned about is looking at that option C, we presented Friendsville and Accident with only having 2 classrooms. However, when we looked at, and whenever the slide came up from Grimm and Parker, we're showing Northern Elementary to provide 3 classrooms for each of these. If 3 classrooms exist, those numbers look so much more appealing. But is there a guarantee that we will have those 3 classes? Because the 2 classrooms, to have 30 kids in a kindergarten and any kids amount of kids in over 20 in a pre-K, I don't know that, I thought there was a restriction on pre-K classes that you can't go above 20. So some clarification that if this were to happen, that we will have 3 classrooms, or we can reach out to that 3rd classroom if we are approaching that 30 student to teacher ratio. Also, prior to even going into the current grade band, looking at possibly moving the central office staff, and if we can utilize those offices into our high schools, either Northern or Southern, splitting it up and maybe having the central office become actually a more central office in our community instead of being completely in the town of Oakland. And then from that, looking at the grade band of pre-K through 4, 5 through 7, and 8 through 12, because I understand with the career and technology being ready, I think it is crucial and it is a great idea to have our 8th graders in with the high school. And I know from the current grade band model of the 7th through 12th, the 7th and 8th grade wing, I don't necessarily believe, from what I've heard from a lot of people, that 7th and 8th graders will continue to be in that hallway, because it'd be important for 8th graders to be immersed with the high schools, because they need to be able to get those high school like the credits, and they're going to be with upperclassmen, that they're not going to be actually segregated those first 2 years or 2 years in that program. So figuring out if the central office could move into our schools, if we could reevaluate the grade band so that middle school still exists, because 7th grade is weird and students need to have that time to develop and hit adolescence as they need to with their own peers, and then possibly consider a single high school. If we have to go back into further consolidation, I much rather see our 9th or 8th and 12th graders be on a bus for a longer period of time than my 5th and 6-year-old. Thank you.
Amanda Wakefield.
I'm Amanda Wakefield, and I'm a product of the Garrett County Public School System. I went to Accident Elementary, Northern Middle, Northern High, and my kids go to Accident now. Since high school, I've attended 4 colleges and universities, and I now have a career I love as a medical laboratory scientist. But as a child here in Garrett County, I was below the poverty line, living in a trailer with no cable TV, no home internet, no home computer. My family wasn't able to afford those kind of things. And the educational opportunities I had access to through the public school system are major contributing factors to who I am today and what I've accomplished. And the reason I still live in the area and didn't move away for better financial opportunities is because I want my children to have access to the same school system and upbringing that I had. The way I see it, if schools close, more and more students are going to leave for multiple other educational avenues available today, like private schools, cyber schools, homeschooling, the Sylvan Learning Center, or even moving over to Allegheny County, where they have an equally great educational system, more favorable housing market, better jobs, and they have a few schools with lower enrollment, but they aren't planning on closing any of theirs. And not to sound negative, but worst case scenario I'm afraid of here is closing our schools will cause students to leave. Less students equals less funding. Less funding means more cuts to programs, staff, infrastructure, which will cause more unhappiness and more students to leave, and more funding will go, and the downward spiral will continue. Soon the only students left in Garrett County Public Schools will be underprivileged kids that have no other options, and they will be subjected to a lower quality, underfunded education, much like what we've seen happen downstate. And one day when you have meetings like this, there will be no happy, educated, professional people here to talk to you about how much they loved their Garrett County Public School education, because those kind of people won't exist anymore. Aren't there some sort of grants, COMAR waivers, assistance programs, something the state can look into to help us keep from closing schools? It just feels like the only options we're presented with are, hey, we're closing schools, let's pick which ones get the axe. That doesn't feel good enough. So, thanks.
Peyton Carr.
Hello, my name is Peyton Carr. I am here representing the Oakland FFA chapter. So currently our allied health is taking 50% of our FFA classrooms, which our FFA has the most members. It has the most members of all programs in the school. Currently, we have about 4 classrooms, but we do use all of those classrooms, as our main classroom where the teaching is done is usually too small for all of our members in the FFA. So we diverted one of our classrooms into a meeting room, which we have set up chairs. We have a desk up front that we use for meetings, and that can seat all of us perfectly. Now, the Allied Health will be taking that room along with our CDE room, which is what we use for our meat judging teams, our dairy judging teams, AgMech. That's what we use for us to practice and go over notes and study and things like that. I would like to point out, if you take 50% of our room, there is a safety issue concerning that the 7th and 8th grade will be coming into the high school. That means there will be way more kids in the FFA room, in the ag room, in the ag pathway period, which means that there's just not enough room for any of us to be around. Thank you.
Christy Thomas.
Good evening. My name is Christy Thomas. I'm a graduate of Northern. I went to Grantsville, went to Northern Middle. I currently have a son right now in 4th grade in Friendsville. Friendsville provides great educational opportunities for all students at no cost to Garrett County Public Schools. They can walk to the library, which they go once a month. And if the weather's bad, the librarian comes to the school. Friendsville Elementary is also located in walking distance to the fire department. The fire department teaches the students about safety, and also they get to see the cool trucks, which they love. Students in the 4th grade last week actually got to walk to the mayor's office, and he talked to them about local government and what it's like to be a mayor. So as you already know, Friendsville also offers unique educational experiences like making maple syrup, raising trout, working in the greenhouse, and planting a garden. If you proceed with the closings of Friendsville Elementary, what happens to these opportunities? I know we already touched base on transportation, but I'd like to bring up the concern with the amount of time students will be on the bus. Currently, my son is on the bus for 40 minutes. With that being said, we live 2.5 miles away from the school. What will happen when he has to travel farther? I know there was a mention of maybe adding a bus. I have a family that drives a school bus. It's already hard to find subs for buses, so that's kind of a big undertaking. All I'm asking is that you take the time and think of through all the impacts this will have on the students and the communities. Thank you for your time.
Tara Crawford.
Hi, I'm Tara Crawford. I am a resident, of Accident with 2 children in Accident, one of them in a 4th grade classroom currently with 31 students. So that has, I can attest, been an adventure. My notes, like some of us tonight, are sort of scrawled down based on what you all presented, and thank you for putting all that together and for the presentations that were recorded following the last board meeting. A few things jumped out at me, and so these are mostly questions that I look forward to having answered in the future. A lot has been said about Blueprint and the adaptation that will need to occur with raising teacher salaries by a significant percentage over the next 10 years, starting with $60,000 as a base salary. And I understand why we're talking about Blueprint requirements, but I do wonder why increased salaries are such a factor in the grade band alignment conversation, when it's been said many times by many folks that teachers won't be lost, right? They won't be riffed, I think is the term that's used. So I would wonder a little bit more about how that's going to interact with grade band alignment. Also, we're talking about changes. A lot of focus was given tonight on changes into 2033, right? Which is even a weird number to say. But we're talking about 10 years in the future, new governor, new legislation, new ideas. It was good to hear that Governor, I almost said Hogan, Moore has funded so much into the future for Blueprint. But I've spoken with Senator McKay on a number of occasions, and he's attested that there's really a lot of question among the legislation about what this looks like in the future. And so certainly 10 years into the future, we really don't know. And that's something else that comes up often. We think, we feel, we believe. We're estimating, we are projecting, which is all you can do. But when we're talking about these drastic changes to our public school system, to the staff, to the students, to the facilities, and a lot of money being spent over it, I feel like we need to know more. I have much more to say, but one thing did stick out to me when looking at the cost for a potential new Friendsville. and that is the $1.5 million for the land. That's what I do every day. And so a couple of quick numbers showed me that an average cost for a large acreage property is about $8,613 in 21531, giving that estimate 60,291 to 86,130. So under 100,000 for the land. Of course, the infrastructure has a cost, but I am aware that the county commissioners are happy to work with other groups on infrastructure assistance, such as workforce housing. I have a feeling they'd be willing to work with you all on infrastructure as well. And while that doesn't make up the 4 couple million in the new school, it certainly does have an impact. And my point is that there's a lot more research that can go into all of these things. We're talking about huge changes and huge differentiation between the northern and the southern end. And I appreciated Mr. Wazlowski mentioning the redistricting exploration, but I would echo the request to see a little bit more about that, because we can see the Broadford district touching almost every other school district in the county. And so if there were slight changes, such as bus options, we're talking about rerouting for Friendsville, perhaps there's additional options there. So I'm just asking for a little more research, and we only have about 2 months until the projected vote. So it seems like a lot to do, and I appreciate the work that you've done to this point. Thank you.
Mike Henderson.
My apologies. I really wish I didn't have to do this to y'all. But your presentation's wrong. Just straight up wrong. If you go to the slide there for the repairs on Northern High School, you came up with $2.5 million. I'm afraid that the last 2 weeks ago, they voted $7.5 million for a partial air conditioning. The first week of February, the IAC released the figures on the facility condition index for the Garrett County. Northern High is rated at 66. That qualifies for a total overhaul or replacement. I don't think you're going to do that for $2.5 million. Especially once you spend $7.5 million in the first place. The whole purpose of the system, the whole reason that it exists, is to provide teachers. We have roughly 3,500 students. Divide that by 15, and we'll come up with about 233 teachers. Multiply that by $100,000 piece average, and we're going to come up with about 24 million. Add in a couple of million, just a buffer zone, and that's about half the budget. Leaves us six. Have you done any analysis on how many people you expect to leave the system if this plan goes through? You have not done, or I have not seen, a total cost of ownership for the buildings. Even looking at the Southern project for $41 million, if you project it out 10 years, 15 years, you're going to be replacing the roof and the entire the mechanical systems also. That's going to be piled on top of that $41 million that you spent now. I wish I didn't have to be saying this. If this plan goes through as you intended, a perfect plan, Northern Middle School winds up at 53% use. Northern High winds up at 74% use. Those are numbers that justify replacing those buildings or consolidating. But that's the goal to get to, because right now the numbers are worse. I wish I didn't have to do this to you. You mentioned the CN, the Comprehensive Maintenance Plan, and CIP. There's tens of millions of dollars of elementary school math in there that's simply wrong. You can't add simple numbers. I invite everybody in this room to go to those pages, look for it, and look for the addition problems. Give it to your third graders. Have them add it up. I wish I didn't have to do this to you. I really don't. In all the world, I have all the respect for both of you. But facts are facts. Thank you.
Please forgive me if I pronounce this last name wrong, but Bethany Cobb? Cole? Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to sign up to speak? I just want to make sure we got everybody. You can come up and sign. Annetta Enlow.
My name is Annetta Enlow. I actually went to private school, so I didn't come up through the Garrett County school system, but I have two children that did. My daughter is Christy, who spoke earlier, is a senior at Northern. The one question I have is, and you may have answered it earlier, if there is a school consolidation, is that going to change the staffing numbers? How will that affect the overall picture? My other concern is, as some of the others talked about, I really don't want to see any of the CTE programs be diminished. Ms. Schweitzer said she was a sports mom. I'm a farm mom and a farmer. At the end of the day, we need food, we need to eat. If the locker rooms are dingy and we don't have food, you know what's going to happen. So I'm just asking, please don't diminish these classrooms. There's a lot of room for expansion. There's a lot more learning to teach all the kids about ag. One thing I've learned in Northern, it's not just the farm kids that are in FFA and wanting to learn. There's a lot of kids that aren't farmers. They're using FFA to come in and learn about farming, learn how to grow plants, and it's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
This is Danielle Loscom.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Danielle, and I grew up in Friendsville and went to Friendsville Elementary and Northern Middle, and then a half a year at 9th grade in Northern High School. And I'm just jumping in here. I don't know a lot about what's going on. I learned a lot tonight. I just wanted to say that I feel like in this day and age, to disrupt all the students and change all the school systems is scary, and I just feel like, I know I struggle with depression and mental health, and I feel like it would be very disruptive for a lot of the children, and I just feel that our world is very scary right now, and with all the shootings and everything, and I just think we have to really pay attention to the communities and not change things so much. And so I feel like I just wanted to say that I find that that would be really important to do, to keep it as is.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the presentation and to provide us with your feedback. And we will be meeting again with our elected board in not this coming Tuesday, but the following Tuesday. So right after Easter. So next Friday's Good Friday. Then we have Easter Monday. That next Tuesday, right after Easter Monday, is our board meeting. So the agenda, April 11th, but location is Southern High. Southern High. Yep. Okay. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.